Hi, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd, and today I'm going to be looking at All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. Here we go. So this is George Harrison's debut solo album of rock music. He had previously released 2 albums of avant-garde and electronic music, which, correct me if I'm wrong, were used as film soundtracks. After the breakup of the Beatles, George Harrison had built up a catalogue of songs that he had written over the years, but because the Beatles only included 1 or 2 George Harrison songs on an album, they were never recorded. So when the opportunity came up, with the help of Phil Spector, he had recorded all the songs he had written over the years, and interestingly enough, this actually became the first #1 album on the charts by an ex-Beatle. I think the defining song on this album is probably My Sweet Lord. It's a song that was written about George Harrison's experience with Hinduism, and specifically about the Hindu god Krishna. Although it's a spiritual song, I think it's a song that everyone can enjoy because when George Harrison wrote it, he wanted to sort of break down the barriers that organized religions had sort of built up, and I think the song really is very effective in doing that. One thing that's notable about this song is this is really the first time you hear George Harrison's signature slide sound, which is a more melodic approach rather than playing blues like most slide players do. This song was also the subject of a copyright infringement lawsuit in 1971 when Ronnie Mack heard this song and felt it was very similar to his song He's So Fine, which was performed by the Chiffons, and I can definitely hear the similarities between the 2 songs, but I don't really think that George Harrison was consciously trying to rip off that song. Despite this, My Sweet Lord has gone on to become one of George Harrison's best known songs, and it's probably become his signature song of his solo career. My favorite song on this album is such a hard decision to make because there are so many great tracks to choose from. But if I had to choose, I'd probably go with Wah Wah because it's such a great rock and roll song and it has a fantastic opening guitar riff, and it really showcases George Harrison as a great lead guitar player. The song was written as a response to John Lennon and Paul McCartney heavily criticizing George Harrison's guitar playing during the Let It Be sessions, and this song was written around that time, and if you watch the Let It Be movie, you can really see that as an example in the movie, especially between George Harrison and Paul McCartney. They kind of are at each other's throat at one point. George Harrison has said that despite the critical acclaim that this song has gotten, he feels that it's a little overproduced, and I can kind of see where he's coming from. There are actually 2 drummers on this song and a lot of different noises going on and different atmosphere, which is really typical of Phil Spector. The production on this album is pretty typical of Phil Spector. He's using his wall of sound style where he gathers all the musicians in the studio at the same time and records everything live, and there are a huge number of musicians on each song. At times the production style can get in the way of the song, but more often than not it's really there to enhance the songs and really showcase George Harrison as a great songwriter, and I think the production really helps with that. After the Beatles broke up, in my opinion, George Harrison had the strongest solo career. Paul McCartney was really great at crafting pop songs, John Lennon was very good at putting his worldview into music, and Ringo was a really great showman. But George Harrison seemed to have something that the others didn't really have, and his songs were a little more personal, which made him a bit more of an accessible personality, and that's where people really started to connect with him as a person and really saw him as a songwriter that they could identify with. If you're unfamiliar with George Harrison's solo work, All Things Must Pass is a great place to start, and I highly recommend this album if you're a huge Beatles fan but you don't know the solo stuff. So anyway, let me know what you guys think of this album in the comments. If you'd like to suggest a classic album for me to look at, please leave that in the comments as well. Be sure to subscribe so you know when I post new videos, and you can check us out on Twitter and Facebook. You can support us on Patreon, and you can check out the website, polyphonicpress.com. All those links are in the description, and that's about it. Take it easy.